So imagine a man who experienced near death, navigated these incredibly deadly religious wars, even served as mayor.
And still found time to think about, well, everything.
Exactly. Thumbs, cannibals,
Yeah,
you name it. What kind of wisdom could he possibly offer us today?
it's a great question.
We're looking into insights on how to live, drawn from Michel de Montaigne's writings, mostly through Sarah Bakewell's book, How to Live.
Yeah, and his life was just packed. Personal thoughts, politics, just watching people.
The range of topics in his essays is pretty wild. Friendship, sure, but also smells, cruelty.
Thumbs. Can't forget thumbs.
Right. And speaking of, insightful reflection, we should also mention the YouTube channel Mindful Moments.
Oh, yeah.
They use AI for book analysis, aiming to spark critical thinking. Sort of fits the spirit of what we're doing here today, exploring Montaigne.
That makes sense. And it's interesting with Montaigne, he wasn't really aiming for some grand philosophical system, was he?
No, not at all. His essays feel more like explorations, just him thinking things through on paper.
Uh-huh. And those really simple titles show it. Of friendship. Of cannibals.
Of thumbs. It's very direct, very down to earth.
Which is probably why it still connects, right? People want knowledge that feels, real and accessible.
Let's talk about his own experiences. That near-fatal writing accident that had to have shaken him up changed how he saw things.
Oh, absolutely. You can almost see it as a pivot point.
Right.
Because not long after that, and also his brother died around then, he quits his big job in the Bordeaux Parliament.
Instead of climbing the ladder further.
Exactly. He steps back, chooses writing, reflection. It's a real contrast to his father, who was apparently very diligent about managing the estate. Montaigne found that stuff kind of tedious.
Yeah, you get that sense. And what I find really interesting is how he seemed to appreciate being, quote, ordinary and imperfect, especially with the backdrop of the French religious wars, all that turmoil and, the disillusionment among the educated folks. He looked towards simpler perspectives.
Well, why do that? You have to consider the context, right? These religious wars were brutal, just horrific violence fueled by these rigid beliefs.
Total fanaticism.
Exactly. So maybe Montaigne focusing on everyday life, the wisdom of the common person. It was a way to ground himself, to step back from the madness.
Like finding truth in the mundane, almost.
Yeah, maybe a kind of cult of ignorance, as Bakewell puts it. Rejecting intellectual showiness for simple truths. And that feels relevant now too, doesn't it? When you feel bombarded with information.
Definitely. Maybe wisdom isn't always in the complex theories.
Maybe it's just in acknowledging our imperfections, our ordinariness.
But he certainly didn't ignore the dark side. He looked hard at the cruelty of those wars.
Oh, for sure. Bakewell uses examples like that commander, Montluc, his brutality and how he justified it.
Chilling stuff. It shows the kind of moral tangles Montaigne was interested in. He wasn't after easy answers.
No, and what's key is that he wasn't really trying to lay down moral laws. It seems like he was more driven to understand
the psychology.
Yeah, the psychology, the practical side of extreme conflict. How do people rationalize doing terrible things? What happens then? He gets into the nitty-gritty of behavior in awful situations, rather than just pointing fingers.
Okay, switching gears a bit. That friendship he had.
Oh.
Not with it, Tin de la Boétie.
Ah, yes. Legendary.
It sounds incredibly deep, almost mystical, the way he described it.
Oh.
Because it was he, because it was I.
That line says it all, doesn't it? It wasn't just shared interests or something logical. It was fundamental.
Yeah.
And La Boétie's own writing on voluntary servitude is significant, too. Montaigne worked hard to edit and publish it after his friend died. That shows serious commitment.
And they faced death differently, too. La Boétie was apparently quite stoic about it.
Very accepting. While Montaigne, he grieved deeply. It shows there's no single right way to deal with losing someone or facing your own end. Thinking about friendship and loss, it might be interesting for you around this point to maybe check out Mindful Moments or even some of our other discussions that touch on these kinds of human connections.
Good point. Montaigne also wrestled with skepticism, didn't he? As a way to handle uncertainty.
Right. The goal being ataraxia, that state of calm, freedom from disturbance.
So, not denying everything, but more. Holding back on judgment.
Exactly. It was a tool for him, a way to find some quiet inside when the world outside was chaotic. Recognizing that we just don't know everything, and maybe it's wise not to claim we do.
How did that compare to other schools, like Stoicism?
Well, the Stoics were more about facing difficulties head-on, building inner resilience. Montaigne leaned a bit towards the Epicurean idea, too, sometimes deflecting trouble, finding happiness even if it means a little. Self-deception.
Like those stories Bakewell mentions. Lacus and Thessalius.
Yeah, finding contentment even in, let's say, altered perceptions. It's a different tactic from Stoic confrontation.
And his views on animals are interesting, too, using stories about them to sort of question human superiority.
Definitely. Highlighting their cleverness, their sensitivity.
Mm.
It's such a contrast to someone like Descartes later who saw animals as just machines.
Montaigne had more empathy.
Seems like it. He saw a connection, maybe challenged our vanity a bit by showing animals weren't just dumb brutes.
So despite all this contemplation, he did get involved in public life, mayor of Bordeaux.
He did, and apparently his main goal was just keeping things calm, maintaining order during a really rough patch.
Yeah, but he got criticized for it, for not being zealous enough.
Yeah, some called it languishing zeal. But from his perspective, maybe doing less, avoiding rocking the boat when things were already so unstable. Maybe that was the smartest move.
So inaction is a valid strategy sometimes.
Especially when the innovation around him was religious war and strife. A very nuanced take on leadership.
He traveled quite a bit too, didn't he? And really noticed things.
Oh, a very keen observer. His travel journal is full of details. Fancy bird cages in an inn, ostriches on leashes.
Ostriches on leashes.
Spiritually. And remote-controlled gates, fancy fountains. He was just curious about everything, the practical details of how people lived elsewhere.
Finds fascination in the everyday.
Totally. Even at home, amidst his complaints about managing things, or even his wife sometimes.
Yes.
You get glimpses of family life, playing games, word puzzles. It rounds out the picture. He wasn't just the solitary thinker.
So his essays were popular at first, but then the church condemned them.
Yes, they ended up on the index of forbidden books. But people kept reading him, especially in England, and later the Enlightenment thinkers picked up on his ideas.
And his appeal lasts, doesn't it? That moderation, the curiosity, the focus on the individual, it still feels relevant.
I think so. That mix of skepticism but also acceptance, his willingness to look at human complexity, warts and all, and valuing individual experience, that's timeless. It's why his voice still carries.
So back to that first question. A man who saw so much near-death, war, politics, yet pondered thumbs and cannibals. What's the wisdom for us?
Maybe it's not about definitive answers. Maybe Montaigne just gives us a really rich way to ask the questions, a model for exploring what it means to be human.
Right. It's really up to you, the listener, to take his spirit of inquiry and apply it to your own life. Draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, think about which of his insights really clicks with you. How could you maybe philosophize only by accident, as Bakewell says, in your own day-to-day?
If this exploration got you thinking, we definitely encourage you to subscribe for more discussions like this.
And please share it with anyone you think might enjoy digging into ideas and, thinking critically.
We'll put links to How to Live and other bits and pieces in the show notes if you want to buy the book.
But yeah, most importantly, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep thinking for yourself.